When we talk about LaMelo Ball, the first thing that comes to mind is flair, flash, and a game that feels like it was born for the modern NBA. He's a 6'7" point guard who lives to push pace, drop dimes, and pull up from deep without hesitation. But what if we took LaMelo, stripped away the modern luxuries of spacing, pace, and today's softer whistles, and dropped him into the fire of the 1996 NBA? We're talking hand checking. We're talking brutal rim protection. We're talking a league where guards feared the glove and centers patrolled the paint like hungry lions. Would LaMelo's numbers still shine? Or would his game be swallowed alive by the 90s? Today, we find out. Let's start with reality. In the 2023-24 season, LaMelo Ball averaged 23.3 points, 8.4 assists, and 6.4 rebounds per game for the Charlotte Hornets. Those numbers scream modern superstar. They place him among the league's elite young guards. Playmaking like Luka, rebounding like a wing, and scoring with deep-range confidence. But those stats exist in a league with 100 possessions per game. The NBA today thrives on pace and space. Teams hunt threes like they're free candy. Defenses are spread out. Hand checking? Gone. Hard fouls at the rim? Practically extinct. LaMelo thrives in this context, sprinting in transition, firing cross-court lasers to shooters, pulling up from 28 feet. He's a product of his time, but also a player who pushes the boundaries of what's possible. Now, let's hop in the time machine. The year is 1996. Michael Jordan is at his peak, leading the 72-win Chicago Bulls. Gary Payton is terrorizing guards with suffocating defense. Centers like Hakeem Olajuwon, David Robinson, and Shaquille O'Neal rule the paint like kings. The pace of the game? Just 91 possessions per game, almost 10% slower than today. Defenses are brutal. You could literally put two hands on a ball handler and guide him like luggage. And three-point shooting? It was an accessory, not a weapon. Teams averaged barely 15 attempts a night compared to today's 35 or 40. That's the world we're dropping LaMelo into. So, how do LaMelo's numbers translate? We start with pace. Drop the possessions from 100 down to 91, and every box score number shrinks by about 9%. Suddenly, LaMelo's 23.3 points become 21.2, his 8.4 assists fall to 7.6, and his 6.4 rebounds trim down to about 5.8. But we can't stop there, because pace is only part of the story. Now we add in the defense, the hand-checking, the physicality, the clogged lanes. Scoring efficiency drops, passing lanes close. So we make another adjustment. Scoring takes a further 10% hit. Assists dip by about 5%. Rebounds, they stay steady. After all, the 90s had more bricks, and LaMelo's size means he'd still clean the glass. Now the final line emerges. 19.1 points, 7.3 assists, 5.8 rebounds per game. Still strong, still versatile, but no longer the eye-popping star line of today. At first glance, 19-7-6 doesn't sound like a demotion. In fact, in 1996, those numbers would have been all-star level for a guard. Remember, Gary Payton averaged just 19 points and 7 assists that season, and he was the Defensive Player of the Year. Penny Hardaway, one of the most gifted guards of the era, averaged 21 points and 7 assists. So LaMelo's adjusted numbers would have slotted him right into that elite guard conversation. But here's the catch. How he'd get those numbers would look wildly different. In 2024, LaMelo thrives off the three-point line. Step backs, deep pull-ups, logo heat checks. In 1996, coaches would have yanked him for shooting 10 threes a night. Instead, he'd be forced to live in the mid-range, floaters, bank shots, driving into a forest of big men with elbows ready to remind him where he was. And that's the real adjustment. Not just in numbers, but in style. So how does LaMelo's game stack up against his 90s peers? Let's start with scoring. At 19 points per game, he'd be comparable to Penny Hardaway and slightly behind Clyde Drexler. For assists, his 7.3 would put him in Stockton light territory. Not 12 dimes per night, but strong enough to be top 5 in the league. Rebounds? At nearly 6 a game, LaMelo would tower over most guards, closer to Scottie Pippen's level than to traditional point guards. But the biggest difference? The 90s didn't have many guards with LaMelo's combination of height, vision, and creativity. He would have been a unicorn, an oversized playmaker in a league still trying to define what point forwards even were. But let's be real. Numbers alone don't tell the full story. Imagine LaMelo bringing the ball up against Gary Payton. The glove pressing full court, chest to chest, hand-checking all the way. LaMelo tries a behind the back, and Payton's there, talking trash in his ear. Imagine him driving the lane against Patrick Ewing or Alonzo Mourning. In today's game, he'd flip up a soft layup off the glass. In 1996, he'd be picking himself up off the hardwood, staring at a center who just knocked him into next week. And yet, here's the thing. LaMelo's creativity might have thrived in that chaos. His flair, his vision, his audacity to attempt passes no one else sees, that translates across eras. Even in the 90s, basketball was still a game of imagination. LaMelo has that in spades. So what's the verdict? If LaMelo Ball played in 1996, he wouldn't be the 23 8-6 star we know today. He'd be a 19 7-6 all-star guard in an era that respected toughness, grit, and discipline. His flash might have been criticized, his deep threes ridiculed, but his playmaking, his size, his rebounding, those would have stood out. He wouldn't be Jordan, he wouldn't be Stockton, but he'd be something new, something the 90s had rarely seen. A glimpse of the future 20 years too early. And that's the beauty of LaMelo Ball. Whether it's 1996 or 2024, his game challenges the norm. He bends the rules of what a guard can do, and while his stats might shrink in the 90s, his impact, his vision, that would be timeless. So the question remains, would LaMelo Ball survive the 90s? Absolutely. Would he dominate it the way he does today? Maybe not, but he would have been a star, and more importantly, he would have been a preview of what basketball was destined to become. The 90s had Jordan, Pippen, and Payton, but maybe, just maybe, it could have used a little Ball.